With a spike in elder abuse cases across the state, the Healthcare Authority has issued a new rule aimed at curbing the epidemic. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Tuesday, March 11th, and I'll have more on that story in a few moments, plus a look at the Journal's other headlines and Albuquerque's weather forecast on the other side of this break.
This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, we've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. We work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join us in our mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years.
The Healthcare Authority has issued an emergency rule amid a spike in elder abuse and upcoming legislative action working its way through the roundhouse. With more on this, I'm now joined by Journal business reporter Justin Garcia, who's been following the story. Justin, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Justin, as we mentioned at the top, the Healthcare Authority has issued a new rule amid some spikes they're seeing in elder abuse. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, that's right. So the rule was issued earlier this month, and it's largely aimed at preventing caregivers from exerting harm on the people that they're overseeing. And specifically, it's designed to essentially put people on a list that says, okay, well, this person's committed this or this person's done this, so don't hire them. And it's really in conjunction with a legislative effort that's currently making its way through the roundhouse.
And Justin, it's not only reports of elder abuse that are going up, it's also neglect and exploitation as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the Healthcare Authority kind of lumps all those together into a single statistic, but they've reported that over the last 4 years, cases among people receiving developmental disability waivers have essentially doubled, and cases in healthcare facilities have gone up by 76%. Now, it's important to understand that some of that probably has to do with better reporting mechanisms and that kind of thing. But I talked to Dan Leary, the director of the Healthcare Authority's Division of Health Improvement, and he said that when you start seeing statistics like that, you want to start looking at what regulations are in place to be able to mitigate those, to cap those numbers, and how to really make an impact in that space.
And Justin, kind of unsurprisingly, we're seeing a lot of this spike in elder abuse at care facilities, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's one of those things where that's where a lot of elder people are. That's where they interface a lot with caregivers. So that's unfortunately, that's an opportunity for harm to happen.
So Justin, as we mentioned earlier in the interview, this new rule from the Healthcare Authority coincides with some legislation working its way through the roundhouse, in particular House Bill 131, also known as the caregiver background checks. What can you tell us about that?
Well, as the name indicates, the purpose of it is to strengthen background checks, and it essentially adds a list of convictions that would make you ineligible to be a caregiver. So crimes like aggravated battery of a household member, sex trafficking, assault on a peace officer, that kind of stuff wasn't previously on the list, and that's one of the things that advocates of this bill point out, that New Mexico's list of disqualifying crimes is significantly shorter and less extensive than a lot of other states. So this would make that more extensive.
So Justin, with the new rule, and if this legislation should pass, how is that going to affect the workplace for people in this field?
Well, so one of the statistics that the Healthcare Authority provided the legislature was the number of applicants received in 2024. And they put that number at around 53,000. Of that, there were only about 340 people who were disqualified because of some of these crimes. And among those 340, about half were successfully appealed that process and became caregivers anyway. So they point out that, they don't anticipate this bill having a major effect on that pool of people. But, this is New Mexico, so there's always this question of, how much access to care are people going to get, just because of the general lack of care that kind of is pervasive within the whole state. So it's always a question whenever you're doing stuff like this. But the Healthcare Authority and the legislators who are pushing this bill seem pretty confident that this bill won't affect that, at least in a significant way.
So we'll keep our eyes on House Bill 131 as it continues to work through the legislature, as we are approaching less than 2 weeks to go in the 60-day session. Albuquerque Journal reporter Justin Garcia with the latest. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
If you like hearing all of the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal here on the Leading News, consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal. You can check our show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription and keep up with all the latest news from New Mexico's leading news source. In other legislative news, with the 60-day legislative session nearing its final stretch, Republican lawmakers have accused Democrats of stalling key bills related to crime and health care. Representative Andrea Reeb, a Republican from Clovis, claimed Democrats have, quote, done nothing significant to improve public safety. However, House Speaker Javier Martinez, a Democrat from Albuquerque, pushed back, calling the session successful, citing progress on tax relief for lower-income families and housing affordability measures. So far, only 4 bills have reached Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's desk, but that number is expected to rise significantly before the session's March 22nd deadline. House Republicans voiced frustration that Democratic leaders have blocked GOP-backed bills in committees, either through votes or inaction. Representative Rebecca Dow, a Republican from Truth or Consequences, labeled the session the, quote, unaffordability session, arguing that Democrats have ignored calls for economic relief. Republicans also highlighted legislative proposals aimed at addressing New Mexico's healthcare provider shortage. Representative Jennifer Jones, a Republican from Deming, is pushing House Bill 593, which would provide tax credits for rural practitioners and financial relief for new physicians with student loan debt. Meanwhile, a separate medical malpractice reform bill remains stalled in the Senate. On crime, the GOP criticized the failure of a juvenile offenders bill to advance. In response, Martinez pointed to House Bill 255, which passed on Saturday, which aims to improve the juvenile rehabilitation system. He also emphasized efforts to reform the Children's, Youth, and Families Department. Despite their minority status, Republicans have used legislative rules to slow down some Democratic-backed bills by extending floor debates to the 3-hour limit. House Minority Leader Gail Armstrong, a Republican from Magdalena, defended the strategy as a way to prevent bad legislation, though she expressed willingness to collaborate with Democrats on key issues. Martinez acknowledged the tactic, noting that both parties have used it when in the minority, and described this session as a, quote, marathon in which we are sprinting. To hear more about the key issues that'll be debated during the final 2 weeks of the legislative session, be sure to check out the latest episode of Rounding Up the Roundhouse with Journal reporters Dan Boyd and Megan Gleason. That can be found anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And in other news, an Albuquerque attorney, Rudolph B. Chavez, is under disciplinary review by the New Mexico Supreme Court for his alleged involvement in a long-running racketeering and bribery scheme that allowed DWI offenders to evade charges and convictions. The state Supreme Court has ordered Chavez to respond by March 15th to a petition seeking his suspension. While Chavez has not been criminally charged, he is believed to be an unnamed co-conspirator in federal plea agreements made by key figures in the scheme. That includes former Albuquerque DWI officer Honorio Albert Jr. and criminal defense attorney Thomas Clear III, who has agreed to be disbarred. Federal authorities allege that law enforcement officers accepted bribes in exchange for dismissing or failing to pursue DWI charges. More than 200 DWI cases have been dismissed due to the scandal. The disciplinary petition argues that allowing Chavez to continue practicing law poses a substantial risk to the public. Chavez, a longtime attorney in New Mexico, has not responded to requests for comment. The FBI's investigation into the conspiracy is ongoing. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 68, and this evening partly cloudy with a low around 38. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. I'm Gino Gutierrez. The Leading News will be back tomorrow.